Hey K-Poppers, and welcome back to Hallyu. Today we're going to talk about the legendary second generation girl group Kara. I'm personally a huge fan of Kara's music, but I'm not just doing a deep dive on them because I bias them. Their careers and story are a big reason for the vibrant K-pop scene we enjoy today, especially when it comes to Japanese collaborations like IZ*ONE. So we're going to talk about the group's surprisingly rocky start and how they emerged from the shadows of their seniors and dominated the music scene in Korea and Japan. Then we'll talk about the later stages of their careers, including a voting competition for a new member, and finally we'll bring it all together to see why they deserve to be called a cornerstone of K-pop as we know it. Before we get started, a quick thank you to Hallyu's honorary producers. If you want to be on this list and show off your bias group to everyone watching, you can support my work on Patreon. Patrons also have a say in lots of videos before they're released, so if you want to leave your mark on Hallyu, come join us over on Patreon. So without further ado, let's talk about these wonderful girls and everything that they accomplished. Kara was born from a rich heritage. In the late 2000s, their label DSP Media was a formidable agency in K-pop. They had recently enjoyed seeing their four-member girl group Finkel, which featured Lee Hyori, dominate the late 90s and the early 2000s. So, as news began to leak out that DSP was forming a new girl group named Kara, everyone immediately viewed them as successors to Finkel, with sky-high expectations. And an interesting side note, Kara's name is actually derived from the Greek word kara, which means a sense of joy and sweetness. Certainly befitting of these girls. Kara debuted with four members, Gyuri, Sungyeon, Sunghee, and Nicole, on March 29, 2007 with the song Break It. Their debut album was received well by critics, but it was actually a commercial failure. Whether it was the R&B style of the lead single, or perhaps the strong female image they portrayed, something caused the general public to really not enjoy it. Another factor was that through no fault of their own, Kara found themselves living in the shadow of their senior label mates who were also a four-member girl group. Living in the shadows and constantly being compared to Finkel made it very difficult for Kara to break out and be successful. It even got to the point where people were drawing parallels between each individual member of Kara and connecting them to a corresponding member of Finkel. Just as a quick comparison to understand this, imagine if Blackpink's debut Boombaya was a commercial failure, and the K-pop stands started being excessively hard on the girls by comparing them to YG's previous four-member girl group to anyone. And not only that, but imagine they started saying things like Lisa could never be what CL was, or that Jisoo's vocals didn't match up to Bohm's. This would have been devastating and would have made it really hard for Blackpink to stand out on their own and succeed, and this was the dilemma that Kara was facing. They needed to find a way to stand apart from their seniors and build an image of their own. And for better or for worse, Kara got a kickstart to that image change that they so desperately needed when Sunghee abruptly announced her departure from the group after parental pressure. So DSP held auditions for new members and eventually brought in two new members, Hara and Ji-young. Now as a five-member group, Kara made their first comeback with the song Rock You. The comeback had a big shift in image to a more cute, playful style of song, and it had a naturally pretty look from the girls to go with it. Unfortunately, while Rock You did do better than their debut, they were still nowhere near the top of the charts. But as we know, that didn't last for too long. Kara continued to keep their name in the music scene with frequent comebacks like Pretty Girl and Honey, but it wasn't until the group released their single Wanna that they really started to take off. As part of their promotions on music shows, Kara also performed the song Mister off of the same EP, and the iconic butt dance made the song wildly popular with fans at home and abroad. Then in early 2010, Kara came back with a new, more mature style in Lupin, and it was a smash hit, earning the #1 spot on Gaon. And it was around this time that Kara began hosting a lot of fan meets and various other events in Japan as they started preparing for a Japanese debut. On August 11th of that year, they had that debut by releasing the Japanese version of Mister, which became incredibly popular. Mister became the most downloaded song by a Korean artist ever in Japan. In fact, Kara's presence was so strong in Japan that even when they released an all-Korean compilation album, it still sold over 100,000 copies in Japan. Kara was the first Korean group to achieve that feat since the 1990s. And the girls really earned their keep in Japan in 2011, when they announced that all proceeds from their third Japanese single Jet Coaster Love would be donated to disaster relief. At the time, Japan was in the midst of coping with the Tohoku earthquake and Fukushima nuclear meltdown, so the group's gesture won over the hearts of countless Japanese people. At this point in their career, Kara just couldn't stop producing hits, and when they returned to Korean promotions after focusing on Japan for a while, they released none other than the iconic song Step, which again swept Korean charts and music shows. The group continued releasing chart-topping singles, embarking on sold-out tours, and making history in both Korea and Japan through to the end of 2013. In January 2014 though, a new era for Kara began when Nicole announced that she'd be leaving the group after her contract with DSP expired. Just 2 days later, Jiyoung also stated she'd be doing the same, leaving Hara, Gyuri, and Sungyeon as the 3 remaining members. So, DSP launched a reality show called Kara Project, which was centered around 7 trainees who were competing to become the new 4th member of Kara. Some of the trainees were actually former members of a short-lived DSP group called Purity, which had disbanded that same year. After about 50,000 votes were cast in the finals, Youngji emerged as the winner, and she went on to join Kara. Despite these member changes, Kara didn't slow down at all, and they released more great music after Kara Project, including Mamma Mia, Cupid, and several more Japanese tracks. Then though, on January 15, 2016, Kara's 9-year journey came to an end as DSP announced that Sungyeon, Gyuri, and Hara would be leaving the group when their contracts expired. And I do feel obligated to mention as well the tragic passing of former member Gu Hara on November 24, 2019. Though I'm not going to go into more detail on that right now, as I think she's deserving of her own deep dive at some point in the future. So let's bring everything that Kara achieved into focus and take a look at how they made an impact on K-pop as a whole. Obviously, Kara had an illustrious career as both K-pop and J-pop superstars, but it takes more than popularity to become a cornerstone of K-pop. Kara is one of a select few second-generation groups who made incredible progress for K-pop and the Korean wave. With 57 award wins and 105 nominations, they joined legendary girl groups like Girls' Generation, 4Minute, 2NE1, and Wonder Girls who made a substantial impact on the global success of K-pop. These groups paved the way for future generations of K-pop to succeed as they have, and it's important to remember that when we see so many fantastic groups today, it's because of these megastars who gave K-pop the momentum to grow so much in the last 10 years. Kara's biggest strength in this regard, in my view, is their success abroad, specifically in Japan. They were one of the first groups ever to achieve sustained mainstream success in Japan, and they did tremendous work in bridging the gap for K-pop groups to promote in Japan. It's hard to imagine a world where a hybrid Japanese-Korean group like IZ*ONE even exists without groups like Kara bringing the two countries and their music scenes together in the first place. Just think about this for a second. Over the course of 4 years, from when they released Mr. through to Damaged Lady, Kara had 14 singles. 5 of them were Korean, 9 were Japanese, and they all charted in the top 5 in their respective countries. Maintaining superstar status in both countries simultaneously for so many consecutive years is something almost no groups could do in second and third generations, and Kara deserves serious praise for achieving this. And finally, Kara's ties to K-pop have continued on to this very day. Remember the Kara project that we were talking about earlier? Well, half of those potential Kara members who didn't win the show actually went on to debut in a different DSP group. Check out this live performance of the 7 contestants covering Lupin on the show. Do any of these girls look familiar? Well, 3 of them should. Jun So-min, Yoon Chae-young, and Kim Chae-won would go on to debut in my favorite active group, April. And as we all know, So-min is now part of the co-ed group KARD. Really, what can I say about Kara that the girls haven't already said perfectly through their incredible careers? Despite debuting in the shadows of their senior label mates, they found an image of their own and skyrocketed to superstardom, not just in Korea but in Japan too. They had countless legendary singles that stand the test of time like Lupin, Mr., Step, Jumping, Mamma Mia, and so many more. And their effects can still be seen in the K-pop world to this day through current DSP groups and of course the remaining members' solo careers. There is no doubt about it. Kara are giants among girl groups and always will be, and they've rightfully earned their spot as a cornerstone in K-pop's history. I hope you guys enjoyed this look at Kara, and if you've joined the K-pop world in the past few years, definitely go check out Kara's music. You will not be disappointed. And let me know down in the comments what your favorite Kara song is. Mine has to be Step. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive, and be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss all the future stories like this and all the news and entertainment from the K-pop world that I'm bringing you guys each and every single week here at Hallyu. This has been Deep Dive number 23, Kara.